According to the Sumerians, the moment you die, you do not rest. You travel, down through 7 gates, and at each one, something is taken from you. Your name, your titles, the things that made you who you were, until you arrive stripped bare before a queen who rules the dead from a throne of dust. That part, scholars agree on. Here is the part they argue about. The same tablet that describes the journey down also describes the way out, a cycle that sends something back up, a reset. But this story does not begin with death. It begins with a rule. The Sumerians wrote some of the oldest writings about the afterlife that survive anywhere on Earth. Not vague hints. Full accounts, pressed into wet clay and baked hard in an oven, thousands of years before anyone wrote a word of the religions most people know today. The longest and clearest of these accounts is a poem we now call The Descent of Inana. It was not found whole. It was pieced together from broken bits dug out of the ruins of Nippur, an old city in what is now Iraq, and those bits ended up scattered between a museum collection in Philadelphia and another in Istanbul. It took scholars almost 50 years to put the full text back together from the pieces. There is a second, shorter version as well, written later in the Akkadian language and first found in the ruined library at Nineveh in the 1860s, with more copies turning up later at other places across ancient Assyria. The same journey down, the same gates, the same queen waiting at the bottom. And when you read either version closely, something strange happens to it. It stops sounding like a story about gods. It starts sounding like a report of a place that runs on a set of steps. The Sumerians had many names for that place. Kur, Irkala, Kornugia, a word that means the land of no return. It sat far below the ground, a dark cave of dust where the dead went on living a dim, shadowy copy of the life they had left behind. No sun reached it, no comfort, just a gray version of the world above. It was ruled by a goddess named Ereshkigal, whose name means Queen of the Great Below. She did not leave her kingdom. She sat in a palace called Ganzer and ruled over everyone who arrived, and in the Sumerian system, everyone arrived. King or beggar, priest or thief, the great hero and the forgotten child, all of them came down the same road and ended in the same dark hall under the same ruler. There was no separate door for the good and the wicked. There was one way in, and it was crowded. The version of this place that most people half remember, the simple idea of a sad afterlife somewhere in the dark, is not the full picture. Because these writings do not only tell where the dead go, they lay out the steps that get them there, step by step, in order. Start with the gates. When the goddess Inana goes down into the underworld in the poem, she does not simply walk in. She is stopped at a sealed outer gate by a gatekeeper named Neti, who takes his orders straight from the queen below. He has his orders. He locks 7 gates behind her, and he opens them one at a time, and at every single gate, he takes something from her. At the first gate, the great crown is lifted from her head. At the second, a string of small lapis beads is taken from her neck. At the third, the double strand of beads across her chest. Then the breastplate, then the gold ring from her wrist, then the measuring rod and line from her hand, and at the 7th and final gate, the royal robe itself, the last thing covering her. Each time she argues. Each time she is told the same thing. Be quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect, and they may not be questioned. Strip that scene down to what is really happening, and it turns cold. Piece by piece, in a fixed order that never changes, the system strips away everything that marks her as a person, her power, her rank, her standing, her name. Each object she gives up was, to the Sumerians, more than jewelry. Each one held a God-given power, a piece of who she was and what she could do. By the 7th gate, there is nothing left. She enters the throne room with nothing, lowered and bowed and emptied out. What waits for her there is not mercy. A group of underworld judges, called the Anuna, fix her with what the text calls the look of death. She is struck down on the spot. Her body is hung on a hook driven into the wall, and there it stays, drained and decaying, for 3 days and 3 nights. Hold on to that hook. In time, it tells you something about how the whole machine is built. Because what comes next is the part that still does not quite make sense. This was never just about one goddess. It was about everyone. And once you understand what ordinary Sumerians believed happened to ordinary people down there, the journey down stops looking like a single big punishment and starts looking like a set routine that ran on every human being who had ever lived. When a regular person died, they did not disappear. Something of them survived. The Sumerians called it the Gedum, a kind of shadow or spirit that formed at the exact moment of death and carried the dead person's memory, and who they were, down with it. The body stayed in the ground. The Gedum went below, was given a place, and lived a shadow version of the life it had lost. And then it had to survive there, in the dust. The food of the dead, according to the texts, was dry dust. The water was muddy and bitter, taken from puddles in the dark. That was the food in the land of no return, for everyone, forever. Not fire, not torture, something quieter and somehow worse. A gray life with no joy, nothing to eat but dirt, going on and on. That was the picture the public knew. Behind it sat something more real and a lot more disturbing. The dead could not take care of themselves. They could not feed themselves on dust alone. They had to be looked after. From above, the living were expected to keep their own dead fed. Families poured out offerings of cool, clean water and food at the grave, over and over, on a schedule, for years. The Sumerians had a set ritual for this. The custom of feeding the dead is written down as far back as the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, which makes it one of the oldest religious duties we have any record of. It was not a one-time funeral. It was a running bill, paid little by little, that never closed. And it came with a price if you ever stopped paying. A Gedum that was not fed, not remembered, not cared for, did not simply fade out quietly and accept being forgotten. It came back. A starved and forgotten spirit could climb back up toward the world of the living and make people sick. Bad luck in a home, sudden illness, a streak of trouble nobody could explain. All of it could be read as a dead family member who had been cut off below and was now reaching up out of the dust to collect what it was owed. So the bond between the living and the dead in Sumer was not soft. It was a duty with a punishment built in. Feed your dead, or your dead come looking for you. Not a comforting deal, if you happen to be the type to forget. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expects. Because a system that has a way in, and set portions, and a clear way to go wrong, usually has one more thing built into it: records. And the Sumerians gave the underworld exactly that. There is a name in these writings that is easy to walk straight past. Her name is Inana. She is a smaller goddess, a sister, and down in the underworld she is handed one certain job. She writes down the names of the dead. Sit with what that means. The land of the dead, in the Sumerian mind, kept a ledger. Someone sat below the earth and wrote down everyone who came in, by name. A list of the dead. The oldest civilization we have written records from pictured the afterlife, and one of the first jobs they filled it with was a scribe keeping the books. Everything is in place now. A way in, a sorting line at the gates, a daily portion, upkeep owed from above, a punishment for failing, a written record of every soul held below. The only question left is the obvious one. Does anyone ever get out? And it is right there, at that question, that the Sumerians did the last thing you would expect from a place they themselves named the land of no return. Everything we have laid out so far points in a single direction: down. The whole setup is built to bring the dead in and keep them. So when the text finally describes a way back up, it does not break the rule of the underworld. It reveals it. Go back to Inana, still hanging on that hook. Her loyal servant up in the world above raises the alarm, exactly as she was told to, after 3 days have passed. The cry for help travels from god to god until it reaches Enki, the god of wisdom, and he is the one who acts. He scrapes a little dirt from under his fingernail and shapes it into 2 small beings, and he sends them down with the food of life and the water of life. They find the lifeless body on the hook. They wake it. They bring Inanna back from death itself. But the underworld does not simply open the door and wave her through. There is a law, stated plainly in the text, and it rules everything. No one climbs out of the land of no return without leaving someone behind to take their place. The count of the dead must stay balanced. One spirit rises only if another spirit goes down in trade. A life for a life, kept in perfect count. So when Inanna climbs back toward the light, she does not climb alone. A pack of underworld collectors called the Gala climb up with her, and they are not an honor guard. They are there to collect the replacement. These Gala are described in the text as things that know no mercy. They take no food, they drink no water, they accept no offering and no gift. You cannot pray to them and you cannot buy them off, which is exactly what makes them perfect for the job. The system has let Inanna go on credit, and the dead is walking up the road right behind her. She tries to protect the people who truly mourned her. Her loyal servant, found dressed in dirty mourning rags, is spared. Her grieving sons, also in mourning, are spared. The Gala move on. And then she comes upon her husband, Dumuzi, and he is not mourning at all. He is sitting on a fine throne in clean, bright clothes, comfortable, not bothered, acting like her death cost him nothing. She looks at him, and she gives the Gala the only word they were waiting for: take him. Dumuzi runs. He prays to the sun god to save him. He is turned into a running animal to slip past them, and for a moment it almost works. It does not last. The Gala run him down, grab him, and drag him below, and the empty place in the underworld that needed filling is filled. The ledger balances. The count holds. That could have been the end of it. One soul up, one soul down, the count even again, the books closed for good. It was not. Dumuzi's sister, Inana, the very same goddess who keeps the record of the dead, steps forward and offers herself. She offers to take her brother's place for part of the time. And the final decision splits the year between the two of them. Dumuzi spends half of it below, Inana spends the other half. One of them rises as the other falls. Then, when the season turns, they switch. Then they switch again and again, with no end. Read that slowly, because it is the whole point. The system does not keep Dumuzi. It does not free him either. It cycles him. He goes down, he comes up, he goes back down, on a fixed loop that never stops, with another soul always moving the other way to keep the count even. The Sumerians used this pattern to explain the seasons, the death of the land in the dry months, and its return when the rains came back. A wheel of going down and coming back, turning forever, balanced at every moment. There is a reason this particular story is still argued over today. Because once you gather the pieces the Sumerians left scattered across their tablets and set them side by side, the gates that take you apart in order, the set portion of dust, the upkeep owed by the living, the written list of names, the strict law of one for one, and the endless cycle in and out of the dark, you are no longer looking at a simple afterlife. You are looking at something with the clear shape of a process: bringing in, taking apart, storing, upkeep, counting, and, for at least one soul, sending back. That shape is what a certain group of writers grabbed onto and would not let go of. In 1976, a writer named Sitchin published a book claiming that the gods of these tablets, the Anunnaki, were never myths at all, but real, living visitors from another world, and that the whole Sumerian story of where humans came from was a true, word-for-word record of those beings building humans for their own goals. Mainstream scholars reject almost all of Sitchin's translations. They say his readings of the cuneiform are wrong, his sources hand-picked to fit, and his big claims not backed up by what the tablets actually say. That pushback is fair, and it should be said plainly. But there is a detail in the older texts that gives his readers something solid to hold on to, and it is not made up. The Sumerians and the Babylonians who followed them never described human beings as souls that simply never die, drifting off to a reward. They described something far stranger. In their own creation stories, humans were shaped out of clay mixed with the flesh and the spirit of a god who had been put to death. And from that god came the part of a person that lives on after the body. The very thing that goes below when the breathing stops. We were built for a reason. We were built to carry the work the gods no longer wanted to carry themselves. And a limit was set on every single life from the very start. A set time. When that time ran out, the God-given part was called back down below, into the keeping of the underworld, into the ledger, into the dust. To the ancient astronaut crowd, that does not sound like a soul finding its peace. It sounds like a part being returned to stock. A spark put into a body, used for a set time of work, then pulled back, written down by name, stored in the dark, and, in the case of Dumuzi, sent around the wheel and put back into use. They call it recycling. They call it a reset. They point at Inana's ledger and Dumuzi's endless loop, and they say the Sumerians were not describing a heaven at all. They were describing a machine that ran on people. Now, the tablets never say that straight out. No line in the Sumerian text calls the soul a part to be used again. That idea is added on top of the evidence by modern writers, and the clay itself does not prove it. Anyone who tells you the ancients plainly described soul recycling is selling a sureness the tablets do not hold. What the clay does prove is chilling enough without anyone adding a word to it. The oldest civilization that left us written records did not picture death as a peaceful ending. They pictured it as a move into a managed place, a place with a gatekeeper who takes who you are from you at the door, a queen who never once leaves her throne, a scribe who writes your name into a book of the dead, a diet of nothing but dust, a debt owed by the people who loved you to be paid forever with a punishment if they stop. And a single rule said with no apology and no comfort that the only way out is for someone else to be dragged in. The Sumerians lived more than 4,000 years ago. They watched people die exactly the way we watch people die now, and they tried to figure out what came next with the same hunger we still carry. What they drew was not a heaven and not a hell. It was an operation, cold, ordered, uncaring, running on taking in, and offerings an account that never goes wrong. Maybe they were only telling a story to explain the turning of the seasons and to make their peace with the grave. Maybe the gates and the ledger and the law of replacement are nothing more than poetry, the way a frightened people dressed up the one thing none of them could escape. Or maybe they were describing, as plainly as their language would let them, a system they truly believed was real. One that handled every human being who had ever lived, kept a careful record of each one, and turned, slowly, without ever stopping, sending something down so that something else could rise. They wrote it onto clay so that it would last. It did. The tablets are still here, still readable, still saying the same thing to anyone willing to sit down and read them. You die. You travel. You are taken apart at the gates. And somewhere far below, in the dust, by the light of no sun at all, the count is still being kept.